Hey, here we are. David Silver and Raghu Markus. We are back, and I'm in my new ensconcement. That's a word. I'm out here in California. All of a sudden, I'm like looking around. Where am I? This is crazy. And David looked at the background. If you look at the video, guys, you can see the background of where I am now in the room that I'm in. I said, this could be a safe house in Lebanon. It's so nondescript. It just, I don't know.
Well, it fits in with one of the themes, hopefully, of this. Oh, hello, everybody, by the way.
Yeah, say hi to everybody, Dave.
Hello, it's
Dave.
great to be on the Be Here Now network. And I'm Mindrolling. I'm very pleased. And it's rather late. We're doing it later in the day because it's cooler here in New York City.
Yeah.
And I've been reading one thing, Raghu's been reading another, few things, and we're just going to sort of throw them out and converse.
But meanwhile, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very well, actually. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I am.
Really?
Wow. I feel good. Well,
it's been a while, everybody, so we're just kind of catching up all together.
Right? Yeah, I'm good, and I'm, today, because of this podcast, I've been with cognizant emptiness, Dharmakaya, and because of a book which we can relate to.
Wait, cognizant emptiness? Wait, you jump right into the middle of some.
I thought we should do that instead of talking about, sports. It was a deliberate ploy.
I thought we'd talk about Wimbledon, just
Wimbledon, yeah. I've been watching since I was 6. I've been watching Wimbledon, and that's one of the things I have to now detach myself from in order to achieve cognizant emptiness.
I see.
Here, it's called the Bardo Guidebook, and it's by Choki Nyuma Rinpoche, brother of Minjoo and 2 other brothers, and son of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. And as I said to Raghu a little while ago, and he seemed to like this phrase, I, in a very vulgar way, called them the Kardashians of the Dzogchen masters.
Oh, God, if any of them ever hear this.
Yeah, I'm dead.
Yeah. Dave said that, not me. And
but no, I mean it in a nice way, in the sense that you just can't believe this family. I mean, I don't follow the Kardashians, but I know there's like 100 of them or something, all fashion models. But to be serious for a minute, the lineage, not just of Tulku Urgyen, but of his father, is a very amazing one. And to have these 4 kids, which he did, Shoki's about mid-60s, Minjoo is 46, I think, at this time. He's the youngest one. And there are 2 others. And they've all done amazing books and given incredible tours.
Yeah, Minjoo Rinpoche being one of them, who's been on Mindrolling recently with Krishnadas and I. And it's an really extraordinary family. I mean, each one of them, and you're going to hear stuff today we're going to refer to from each one of them. They have such valuable offerings to all of us to be able to navigate a life in balance, as we call it here. And the father, but I've recommended this book before. This is like at least 6 times. So everybody out there, Tulku Urgyen's memoir. What's it called, Dave?
I don't.
Brilliant.
I just know the As It Is series. There are 2 of them.
Also As It Is. But his memoir is the easiest way to get into him.
Yeah, I've forgotten the name of it.
Yeah, Brilliant something. You'll see a memoir. Just go up.
Yeah, Brilliant. Yes, awareness.
Blazing. It's blazing.
Yeah.
Something. Blazing brilliant is what it is.
Yeah. And if I were to turn around and go over there, I'd find it. But
but just extraordinary, and the sons are, and but yeah, talk about this, because I don't know this Bardo book.
Well, it's somewhat.
Well, let's talk about what the hell a Bardo is. Let's start there.
Okay, I can get to that. But before I do that, it's a lot of it is based on something called the Mirror of Mindfulness, which is a great tract, Buddhist tract. But it's redone because really it's Choki doing a few talks, and then they transcribe it very faithfully. And the Bardos, as I remember them, are there are four main ones, which is the Bardo of natural life, which is what we're in now, that you're watching. You're in natural life. Raghu and I are in natural life. And then the Bardo of the act of dying, which gets its own Bardo. And then the Bardo of whatever you go to, is the Bardo after passing. And in sort of post-hippie 60s, 70s parlance, it was always thought of the Bardo was post-passing. It had nothing to do with this, but that's not true. And Choki reminds you 20 times in the book that this life, this Bardo, the Bardo of a natural life, is the most important one because it's the motivator and the former, the creator of the rest of them. In other words, how you live your life and how you practice and your involvement with meditation will affect, obviously, the way you die and how you experience the immediate post-death Bardo, which can be everything from hallucinations of great terror to opposite hallucinations of pure lands and beauty and landscapes and music and so on. And then he describes in this very much what happens after that. And then there's two Bardos within life. They're not minor Bardos, but they're within our life, this life, which is the Bardo of dreaming and the Bardo of meditating. But because Choki and his lineage believe that dreaming and meditating are part of the karmic manifestations of this life, then they're within the Bardo of this life, not some separate Bardo. So really, this book is a way of living with the knowledge that this is totally impermanent, that everything is going to disappear, and the way we live and the way we practice will determine how we're able to deal with the most important passage we're ever going to have, which is that from being in this body with these five senses into the next one after we die.
Hey,
that's what it is, a guidebook to that, if you can believe.
I found something from his brother. I thought we got to get everybody involved here around Bardo. And this is Minjoo Rinpoche. Bardo can be understood to mean, quote unquote, this very moment. Isn't that something? The nounness of this moment is the continual suspension or pause in between our transitory experience. So it's the pause, both temporal and spatial, such as the tiny halt that exists between this breath and the next. Or the arising and fading of this thought and the next. Right? The interval can also be experienced as the in-between of two objects, the gap between two trees or two cars, the space that provides definition. Or we can understand this interval as the emptiness that allows us to see form. Actually, everything is in between. However minuscule the interval might be, it always exists and it is always bracketed. Everything in the whole world system exists in between something else. From this perspective, the exclusive reference of intermediate to the state between death and rebirth emerges as the prototype for transitions that occur within this life cycle. The Bardo stages then illuminate how these iconic death to life transitions emerge in everyday experience, which is exactly what you were just reading from his brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's the book describes it, but I mean, really what the book is about is how to not waste time in your life once you know that this is actually a construct that you can believe in. And once you have faith in that, I mean, he also says that too much intellectual preoccupation with that will dissipate the faith. So it's not a question of intellectual comprehension, it's a question of both meditation and, of course, right action. Because he says that the cognizant emptiness does not preclude right action within this illusory Bardo, if you like.
Okay, we got to ask, what's cognizant emptiness? We got to get
well, there. It's what
being Aware, cognizant.
The kayas, from Dharmakaya to Nimanakaya via Sambhogakaya. And what that means is that you're gradually, if you're practiced, you're able to drop this life, like your body is being dropped, and move on. And ultimately, you would not be attached to anything, including this discussion, and would reach what he calls ground luminosity, which is, in this guidebook, the combination of awarenesses that you train yourself to watch out for, either in the process of dying or immediately after the last breath. And so those processes are practiced in order to go through, first of all, a sort of calmness which can accept what are essentially hallucinations, either bad or good, to go through them with a practiced, still grounding, if you like. And then
Detachment.
Yes, exactly. And then move into another stage, which is that of, via many minor stages, which is the kaya of cognizance and emptiness, meaning that you're actually becoming the luminous, not empty, but luminous, which is another word for cognizant in a way, the awareness of it all. Now, of course, that's a big ask. So we know the people of the stature of these lamas and teachers and tulkus allows them to know this because they experience it in this life, because their meditation is so intense they can penetrate these stages of passing, which the rest of us block out fanatically our whole life. They, every single day, are concentrating on what they will do when they go into what could be this.
You could. Yeah.
And further, I'll just finish. He does say that cognizant emptiness does not preclude right action in this life, because the karma and interconnectedness of this, be it Maya, be it, not the ultimate, it will affect your transition into the detached Bardo, and then the visionary Bardo, and of course it will help other people who you come into contact with, where you practiced right action.
Yeah, and the emptiness part, we should certainly characterize that. And what, I mean, most simple way to say it is non-attachment to that self that we constantly reference on a day-to-day basis. But it's not just empty of that attachment. As Bob Thurman puts it, it is bliss state. So emptiness is, he calls it a womb-like bliss state that has no subject object. So you're no longer working from mini-me. Your vantage point is from what he's calling cognizant emptiness, which means that you're obviously way advanced now to the point where you're not caught in attachment. But the most important thing here is, to me, learning this stuff is to apply it to where we are right now, where some of us may be in transition or close to it or sick, and certainly, thinking along, taking these advisals in at that level, of course, is really important, but one needs to start that way earlier in life. So as you said, I think one of the words you used was practiced. There has to be that practiced experience on a day-to-day basis to even think that you can get unglued from these attachments, right? I mean, so, and like you say, it's a big ask here for these kind of folks who've, or at least the Tulku-Urgyen family. I mean, the karma is involved. Lifetimes of this kind of work is involved. And I mean, Minjoo Rinpoche, as you guys, if you've watched him on Mindrolling or listened to that episode, a few weeks ago, I mean, he left his monastery. He was the abbot of several monasteries, in fact. He was treated like a king on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And he just went, okay, this got to stop. I want to relate with true nature without all of these accoutrements. And he went AWOL over the wall for 4.5 years. And he had a few rupees, which, he spent right away. And the book, by the way, and I have to mention this, and again, this is highly repetitive, and it's the only way, and this is me, it's the only way this shit seems to sink in by repeatedly going back to it. So you have to excuse me for the repetition on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's good for all of us. This book is in love with the world. I have not studied a book in a long time the way I am studying this book, because there's so much in it. That passage I just read about the Bardo, that meaning this very moment, that's from his book as well. So practiced is an important word with this, with even approaching the idea of what a Bardo is.
Yeah, and Choki, it's funny we're talking about Tulku and Choki and Minjoo, and these are all the same DNA. Choki says, they sort of don't mince words when they talk about the lack of practice and what might happen to you. And I wanted to read just a little quote. In the Bardo of becoming, the 80 innate thought states commence again. One starts to think, where can I take birth? And begins to search, experiencing immense suffering and worry. If one is going to be born in the 3 lower realms, one's head will not be facing up, will be facing down. In other words, like an insect. Downwards due to the power of karma. If one is going to be born in one of the 3 higher realms, then one will walk upright, one's head held up. And in concert with that, he also says that his father and others recommended to him that when they know they're dying, they should sit up. If it's at all possible, obviously it's not possible for everyone, but if it is possible, to sit up as you would be meditating, and then you won't be distracted and will be able to go to that place that you glimpsed over lifetimes and maybe in this lifetime. It's like when you meditate, sometimes you really do go somewhere and you catch yourself, and you go, oh, I was there. But by the time you said that, you're not there. And that's the difference between, say, me and Choki, because they're doing it every time. They're not, watching CNN or so on. They're only doing this. And they're still wonderful, amazing, warm, humorous people. But they say, if you want to get into this game, you got to pay. You really got to get your A game.
So here's what I'd be doing. I'd be watching Wimbledon, but I'd have a big sign over the television: "Sit up."
No, really, but I mean, he wouldn't mind that, because one of the things that Choki says, and Minjoo says it too, they all say, the real, McCoy, they say, learning, the 3 this and the 4 that and the 8 this and the 84,000 that, it can kill people. It's like, I can't do that. I can't remember all this stuff. He says that's not important. What's important is just to practice simple meditation over and over and over again. So by the time this comes at you, you may be surprised, but you'll quickly get into it, because you'll recognize, oh my God, I remember what I read in that book, and I remember what happened to me in some meditations. Like, for instance, he talks about, as I saw it, as I remember it, there are red and white kind of forces. That the red one represents your mother, the white one represents your father. And at the time of death, just like at the time of birth, they join. And if you practice like they have, you'll see them. You'll actually see a red thing coming up from 6 inches below your navel, and a white thing coming from the top of your head and joining at the heart chakra. And when that happens, it's time to practice everything you've learned about receiving the next Bardo.
It's time to sit up, mother.
I mean, this is a guidebook. I mean, it's not like a guidebook to cooking or to how to mend your motorcycle or even how to become the best meditator and mindfulness, macher in America. It's nothing to do with that.
Mindfulness macher. I like that. There's a lot of them. Oh my.
There are 10 million now in America. 10 million mindful people walking around.
We need another 40.
I really made that up. I don't know how many there are.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. There's a lot. It's all over the place. Yeah. So you also, something else of interest And well, I want to continue along this line because one thing that bugs me is that when we talk about stuff that we kind of half know what the hell we're talking about and we don't really go through it. And I want to go back to the emptiness thing, which we have talked about a lot. And it relates to this film, Becoming Nobody, that the Ram Dass film that's going to come out September 2019, which is in a couple of months. And a lot of people are going, well, becoming nobody? What does it mean? We're not knowing. We're a somebody. We're podcasters, you and I. Right now, we are podcasters.
Mm.
It's not a nobody. It's a somebody. So, in this film, there's one really marvelous little section from Ram Dass that really says what it is. He says, when you can make yourself into zero, then your power is unbelievable. You are an irresistible force where there's no high, no low, no judgments, no opinions, no good, no bad. You are merely part of it. And then by the very nature of things, you are the commandments. You are the precepts. You are the morality. You don't do it because you ought to do it. You are that which cannot hurt another human being. You just are. You literally die into service. You die into the plane of reality where you see that a starving person, a dying person, a hungry person, or a frightened person is you. It's not her or him or them. You die in your separateness. The whole trip of what's good for me, what do I want? What do I need? What do I want? Just becomes less interesting. And the minute that becomes surrender, just given up, it falls away. It falls away from this deeper wisdom. And then you merely become an instrument of the flow of the universe. You become part of the Tao, part of the way of things, and the serving and that which is served is all part of it. It's all part of it. At that moment, there's no coming down or going up. It just is. And that to me is the finest explication of the reality of emptiness and what happens in that moment. And when that surrender just happens, and it's what we've called the surrender that's no surrender. Like the thing of meeting Neem Karoli Baba, people go, oh, you surrendered, it's bhakti yoga. No one ever thought for a second there wasn't any subject object. It was like tuning in and namaste to the deepest part of yourself, right? Which was no different. You knew that what he represented was inside you. And so there's no surrender. So this idea of becoming nobody related to emptiness is, I think, a really important thing to understand.
Yeah, I have two very different little anecdotes to talk about that. One is that just from last night, I was watching the local news for the weather, and they reported on the fact that 3 NYPD officers were called to a Whole Foods last night because they caught someone shoplifting. So they went, and it was a woman, a middle-aged woman, who'd taken a bunch of very basic foods, clearly to cook. And the 3 cops looked at each other and said, no way are we gonna, no way. And they cuffed up the money. It was about $40, I think. And they paid the Whole Foods and told the management they would not make any charges and they would continue to work this woman and make sure she was okay. Later, they interviewed them. And these cops, when asked, why did you do this? It's so strange. They said, it's not strange. What else could we do? What else could we do? Arrest this poor woman who was starving and probably had children, and then she'd be in jail? No, by the way, we've done this a lot. And I saw it, and it almost made me cry because they were so sincere, these guys. They were young guys. They were like in their late 20s, I think. It was quite beautiful.
Wow.
And it doesn't exactly relate to what we're talking about, but it doesn't.
Oh, it totally relates.
They went empty at the moment. They were not cops. And they said that. They were just like the sons of this woman, maybe, it felt like that. But what was most amazing was they didn't take any credit for it. They said, what else could we, I don't understand how, question. We're not heroes. We just couldn't watch this woman be arrested. You know, the other thing that...
Well, compassion, can I just say that's when we talk about emptiness, it's full of compassion, love and compassion. That's what emptiness really is, aside from the letting go of the identity stuff, the ego identity, aside from self-cherishing and self-interest and self-referential stuff. So it's full of what these guys just displayed. It's a perfect example.
It is, and if you've actually seen the video, which you may see virally somewhere, I'm sure you'll see the look in their eyes, which is one of extraordinary compassion and gentleness. You know, New York City comes.
Wow. The
other thing was how bodhisattvas, or at least somebody you can say has something of that in them, will work sometimes. This is a real Dave story, this one. In 1997, I guess it was, like, we did that album with Allen Ginsberg and Paul McCartney called Ballad of the Skeletons. And I got very close to Allen because he lives in New York, and we started to see each other a lot. And it was great. And then one time we flew together to Minneapolis. I was further flying to San Francisco. He was going to give a reading in Minneapolis. And we were sitting in a little cafe, you know, as an airport. He asked me, is there anything that you really want to ask me? And we were kind of chummy, you know, so it was sort of weird. And I said, no, not really. He said, no, what worries you? And I said, oh, death. And he laughed and he said, do you think people in this country share that? I said, I don't know. I know that most people are scared of death and they don't talk about it. Okay. Cut to the day before he died. And he was in bed on the Lower East Side with some people came to see him, like Patti Smith, and there were llamas, but at this moment they weren't there. And he called me and Danny, actually, separately. And when he got on the phone with me, he said, hi, this is Alan. And I didn't know he was so ill. I knew he'd been suffering a little. I said, oh, hi, nice to hear you. And he said, listen, I'm close to the end. It's going to be in the next day or two, they're telling me. And I remember our conversation in Minneapolis. And let me just tell you something. When I close my eyes now, instead of it being gray or dark pink, it's blue. And I'm beginning to feel the beginnings of the emptiness, and it sort of feels great. I know I don't have long, and I know I'm seeing things I didn't see 10 minutes ago. So I just wanted you to know that. Thank you for putting me together with Paul McCartney, and I love you, and we won't be talking anymore. And this was just 16 hours before he died. And I remember being overwhelmed because I really liked Alan. He was a lovely person, fantastic. Yeah. But also, it was just the compassion. In that moment, virtually hours before he passed, he remembered that this person who'd come into his life a couple of years before had said, I'm kind of afraid of dying. And he remembered that when he was dying and called me to tell me, and he said it, he didn't say it was reassuring, he was reassuring. And I got off the phone, and the rest of my week actually was impacted. I was just, the rest of my life. But that week, I couldn't get that voice on the telephone out of my head. Not because he made me feel better about dying particularly, but just the beauty of it, just the absolute selflessness of it. That moment. I'd only known him a couple of years. I hadn't known him for 50 years or something. I wasn't a close friend of his.
Yeah.
But we'd had a nice experience together. And how wonderful it was. And I began to be a little more aware of what it means to pass stuff on.
But these two stories, Dave,
I know.
If they don't, I mean, they perfectly exemplify everything we've been talking about. They exemplify.
That's why you allow me on the Mindrolling.
Yes.
You know.
No, they're beautiful. They're really beautiful. It's really. They
fill me with a great deal of humility, actually.
Yeah. Well, what grace.
Yeah.
You know, to have that happen.
Yes. Yes.
Which reminds me, I just saw Alan in the Dylan movie, the Scorsese, you know, Rolling Thunder.
Yeah.
Now, just everybody out there. So just a little background. This is a sideways from where what we've been talking about. But I have told this. Actually, I was on somebody else's podcast this morning, and I was mentioning, he was asking me how I came to all of this, and I was saying how miserable I was as a teenager in my into mid-late teens. It was terrible. But then Dylan came along, and it was beautiful because someone was expressing what I was feeling. This was just phenomenal. I thought, okay, I'm not alone. So that was a wonderful thing. But later on, Dylan, who's maybe, a bit, shall we say, curmudgeon-y, and he got into kind of different expressions of his music, and I happened to catch a bad one in at one point, which was mid-late 70s, where he decided to act like Elvis, and he had a big Vegas belt buckle. You remember that thing? I was in the garden. He ruined my whole childhood, my whole teenagehood in one fell swoop. Okay, done. And from then on, there was some great records, Blood on the Tracks and all that stuff. But gradually, but inevitably, I lost touch with him, and I always had a thing up my ass about, he ruined it. My whole team.
Of course, I totally disagree with this.
Yeah. So Dave and I have been having this dialectic for a long time. Dave has stuck true and has followed Dylan in terms of, been at concerts and so on. I have not. Then somebody tells me, watch this Rolling Thunder review, which is when Dylan went out, when he was in like 74, 5, something like that. And he went out with a troupe of people, including Joan Baez, and it was quite an amazing event. And he went, and Joni Mitchell was there, and the guy from the, 8 Miles High, he sang.
Roger McGuinn.
Roger, yeah. And Dylan was in whiteface. He was put a mask on, so he felt he could be free if he didn't look like himself. Yeah. Anyhow, that's a whole other thing. This film, it's a Scorsese doc, so it's great, right? But the footage that they got, and they got it from some guy from Europe, is extraordinary, of Dylan singing commitment, a presence, charisma, power, the power of the songs, how they came through. I was blown away, totally blown away. So much so, my whole teenagehood was redeemed in one 2-hour Netflix thing or HBO thing, whatever it was, Netflix maybe. Oh my God. So everybody out there, take a look at that if you like Dylan. What?
He sings ISIS at one point. And it's one of my favorite Dylan songs. It's an astonishing song. But the way he did it, if you remember, was like a mime. He had a mime's makeup on. It was like Marcel Marceau in a way. It was all white face. And he did it with movements and with eye movements, and it was beyond words, transcendental. And Dylan said in one interview, he never says much, but he said in one interview that he preferred to carry the Bhagavad Gita around all the time, and that he had it in his pocket, a small one, and read it constantly. And you see, this is the thing, that a great artist is not just a great artist, he's also an investigator, And I think Dylan, his whole life, has been an investigator, like a detective of truth and of all kinds of levels, Yeah, I have only seen half the film so far, but I did see Ronaldo and Clara when it came out, which is the original version of that, of course, that he did at the time. And Allen Ginsberg was in that.
That's why I was remembering it, because Allen was so great. He was beautiful.
It's amazing. How many artists are involved in changing the level of your awareness and consciousness instantaneously? It happens. It certainly happens. That level of art can be considered practice as well, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
As long as you don't get ridiculous about it and become attached to the person as a person. Fan clubs and everything scare the hell out of me, because I'm not crazy about people idolizing people, unless they're masters of time and space.
Masters of time and space, yeah.
But you're right, Dylan. Boy, it's still.
Yeah.
You know,
That was really good.
still
But you know,
78 or 79. I saw him last year in 18. I saw him in 17. Comes to New York every October, and I go to the smallish venue where not small,
right, right.
but 2,000 people.
I mean,
it's magnificent last year, so much so that they wouldn't let him off the stage. But he's the kind of guy that won't do any kind of extra stuff if he hasn't thought about it. I have a Dylan story, actually.
Okay.
Can I tell it?
Yeah.
I mean, people who started this by listening and wanting to know about Choki and Minjoo and Tulku, maybe just want to go for a walk right now. But Dylan, when he performs, he just goes straight off the stage into his van or whatever car is waiting for him. And he's well known for this. He just performs and then walks from the stage to the wings into the car. And a person that I know who's called Toots Hibbert and has a band called Toots and the Maytals, one of the greatest reggae bands. Dylan asked him to open for him about 6 years ago because Dylan was a fan. And Toots did about 8 shows with Dylan. So he was told before the first show, whatever you do, don't get offended when Dylan comes off. He won't speak to you. It's just a trance that he's in, and he goes straight to the car, and then he goes to the hotel. So, Mr. Hibbert, don't be offended. I'm sure he'll love your show. So they did the show the very first night. And Toots, was a remarkable performer, amazing, actually, finished his set. And then as he was walking off, he noticed that Dylan was staring at him very benevolently. And then as he passed him, he said, incredible. And then Dylan did his show. And then when he came off, Toots was very careful not to speak to him or go near him. And instead, Dylan went up to Toots and says, I just can't leave without spending some time with you. So do you mind coming and sitting in my car? And Toots himself told me this, so I know it's true. Yeah. And he did. He spent half an hour with Dylan in the car, with Dylan asking him all kinds of questions about his upbringing, his life.
Wow.
How he'd come to the reggae music that he had and the influence of Otis Redding and great soul singers. And it was just an incredible conversation that Toots had with him. And then at some point, Dylan said, okay, gotta go now. See you tomorrow night. It's the exact opposite of what people had said. It was warm and gracious because there was someone there that he really, really respected.
Turned him on. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's great.
I'm full of celebrity stories tonight.
Yeah, you are. Oh, now what about you remember the Dead Poets Society? You have your own little Dead Poets thing that you told me about, the Zen koans of...
Oh, yeah. Oh,
where's that?
It's at the other side of the room.
Well, go get it. I'll entertain while you're gone.
Okay, I forgot.
Jesus, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because I want to hear what that is. It sounded so fascinating. So Dave told me this is about people who, masters, I think they're masters who on their deathbed, the moment they're, Japanese death poems, right? Written by monks, and they're haikus on the verge of death. So, yeah, give me an example of what the hell anyone says. Okay, this is it.
I'm just going to do it randomly because they're all kind of amazing. And this one's by someone called Ryoto. He died on the 28th day of the 4th month, 1717, at the age of 59. And he wrote, Gaston Ja, Sano, Atasuki To, Hoto Dogisu, which means, I understand. A cuckoo cries today at dawn. I opened it randomly. I'll do another one.
I understand.
Yes. Joa. Joa died on the 2nd day of the 2nd month, 1785, at the age of 71. And I'm not doing this. I've not read any of these before. I'll miss out the Japanese. He said, 2nd month, I wear a new bamboo hat and go home. Right, just afterwards. You see the gist of these. Gohei died on the 7th day of the 7th month, 1819. A lone Paulownia leaf falls through pure autumn air. See, a lot of these are just...
It's like everything slows down to nothing. It's like watching slow motion. And I guess when you're in that state, you just, that reminds me of Aldous Huxley. Ram Dass told me that at the end of his life, and he was taking acid daily, I think, and Ram Dass was with him, he got to the point where he could not really talk, but whatever he'd see, he'd just look and he'd go, extraordinary, extraordinary. It was all that moment, which is this poem, right?
Yes, and yes. I mean, they're all kind of like that. The haikus, those are not haikus. The haikus are slightly different. They're more intense. Kasenjo, again, died on the 26th day of the 7th month, 1776. He died when this country became born at the age of 62. It says, depths of cold, unfathomable ocean roar.
That's it? That's what it boils down to. Yeah.
Know, I mean, some of them are really funny. Isso died on the 17th of November, 1899. Cut your price. What if I've gotten 57? The year is nearly over.
What?
Yeah, exactly what. And that's what he's supposed to do is, and then here's a nice one by Inseki. He said, I give my name back as I step in this Eden of flowers.
Oh, now that's great. Okay, I get that. Okay,
no, I'm just doing it randomly. Right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, they're awesome.
No, that's the best one. That wins.
Well, I mean, the lone leaf, just slowly popping through the air.
I think the haikus are actually, in a funny kind of way, they're different. They're more surprising rather than just based on observations of nature, But I like the way this one by Ranseki. This last night of nights, bush clover whispers, Buddha, Buddha.
I like the one I give my name back. Yeah, let's get that up on the show notes, everybody. That's fantastic. Now, where else could you possibly hear David Silver reciting verge of death poems by Japanese monks from the 16th, 17th century, whatever? Where? Except on Mindrolling, right?
That's right. That's right. It's not on Michael Kay's show.
It's not on Joe Rogan. Not even
Joe Rogan.
It might be on Duncan Trussell.
It could be on.
Yeah, it could be on Duncan's show.
For sure. Yeah. So when we decided to do this, you brought up the name of William James.
Oh yes.
And I wanted you to, sort of expand upon why you brought up William James.
I only did that because I did a podcast with a man named Alastair McIntosh, who is the best person I've ever found who brings together the social activism and spiritual practice. I mean, fantastic. To him, it's a hand-in-hand thing, not one without the other. And he's a wonderful man. He's from Scotland. Anyhow, he introduced, so in this book, he talked about William James, who published a paper in Mind about the inhalation of nitrous oxide. And I think I've told you my story of the dentist last year and the nitrous, and I had an ineffable, like 10, 15 minutes of the divine presence in all its different aspects. It was an extraordinary experience, right? So I'm thinking, wow, William James, maybe I studied it in high school or college. I hardly went to college, so I probably can't say that. His experiment, he induced an altered state of consciousness, in this case, a mystical experience, by getting his brain got affected by the old nitrous. Now, anybody who's out there who's done nitrous, you get that one, boy. And here's I thought it was a great explanation. Rational consciousness, okay, it's one type. See, everything that we think, do, or perspective, whatever, we come from a place of rational consciousness. But he says just one special type of consciousness, all about it, parted from it by the flimsiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness, entirely different. That's step one, to just realize, wow, there is something out here that maybe I should experiment with it. We may go through life without suspecting their existence, but apply the requisite stimulus, in his case, nitrous, in many of our cases, especially Dave and I and others of us, is of course psychedelics, and that kind of experimentation is going on more and more these days. And to actually, people like Maps and Rick Doblin are really working on this from a science basis. Apply the requisite stimulus, and at a touch, they are there in all their completeness. No account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness disregarded. So I read that and I went, okay, this guy, he's called the father of psychology, by the way. And he got discredited and all kinds of different things he said. And, it's really, actually really nuts. Where do I have this? I got to read this. I wanted to share with you, Dave. It was really...
Well, I don't remember reading The Varieties of Mystical Experience, whatever it's called.
Really?
I don't think I did. I think I read some kind of very simplistic version of it. But I know that I had to study Henry James at university.
Right. That's his son or brother or what?
His brother, who was a great novelist, but was a novelist in the tradition of the novel of manners, essentially about wealthy Americans abroad in typically in Florence or Venice, and sometimes at home in New York, and they were all about people's intrigues and ego games and all that. So I was shocked that his brother actually was the complete opposite. And then last year, I actually read a novel about Henry James. Don't ask me why.
Really? Jesus.
There was a lot in it about his conversations with William, and they were combative. In other words, Henry really had no sense of that mystical consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And William was only interested in that.
Yeah.
And, they used to go to their little house somewhere in New York, I think, at that time, and argue. Totally different people. William is considered, I think, I mean, Ramdas would be very interesting on him if he ever chose to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that he investigated those books when he was a student.
So in this, the author of this book that I just told you about decided to quote, you know the psychologist Abraham Maslow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had a 9 characteristics present in mystical consciousness. So, everybody listening, these really point to the ways in which these experiences that you can, once I read this, you go, wow, okay, that makes sense. I had something like that when I was 7 years old. Or, gee, that happened to me when I was just out looking out over a cliff when I was 18. You know what I mean? Everyone has had these. That's why this is so important. So number one is a sense of undifferentiated unity, called the hallmark of the mystical experience, right? Which is the psychedelic experience. Basically, all of us that have done that really know that. Undifferentiated unity. We are all totally connected, and we are one fabric that binds us. And of course, the masters say that's love and compassion. Number 2, objectivity and reality. The experience seems more real than real. How about that one? Remember that? Space and time feel as if their limitations have been transcended. I often tell people I've gone to India many years after Neem Karoli Baba died. There was, he fortunately left us, our Indian mother, Siddhi Ma, and I used to go there instead of doing retreats where I go sit and meditate for a few weeks and come out the other end in fairly good shape. I would just go and sit and plug in, and immediately that space-time continuum would be gone in that presence. So, boy, does that feel good. Because the first thing that happens, you stop thinking about yourself. 4, sacredness, a sense of which pervades the experience. So that's what happened to me on that nitrous thing last year. was just that sacredness, divine presence, deeply felt positive moods, joy, blessedness, love. Paradoxicality, normal categories of logic seem to drop away. Wouldn't that be great, right? It is great. Ineffability, the experience cannot adequately be expressed in words. We all know how we've had experience and we can't translate that to even our near and dear ones. Transiency, the intensity of the experience usually passes quickly, which is one feature that differentiates it from psychosis, right? Okay, great. And the last, positive changes in attitude or behavior towards life, often permanent. That's a great list, right? It was really...
much as you can put it into words.
Yeah, as much as you can put it into words. And so... So in this paper that I took a look at, there was pushback around mystics and mysticism. This is great. Some do claim there are positive grounds for rejecting the reports of such experiences. Number one, mystics are abnormal. They tend to be sexually repressed. Like,
really?
Yeah. Number two, mystical experience is always mixed with other elements such as sexual, emotion, or imagery. Who are these people? I mean, I think they're from the 18th century, so what I think, right? Descriptions of religious experience are inadequate to the facts, highly confused, mixed with error and nonsense, subject to change in time. Okay, so this is the pushback to William James and everything he was espousing. But I love these. That's just fun stuff, everybody.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Raghu, is that for me, actually, it's just a few days ago, and I won't mention his name because he's not a bad person or anything, but he did exactly that on me. In other words, someone who I met, who's an avowed atheist, just listed a bunch of reasons why anything that I might believe in would be complete rubbish. And there were a few of us there and we all sort of heard it. And the best we could do with it was just say, oh, okay, thank you. Move on. Because that kind of thing which says the rational is the only thing we can believe in is exactly what stops us from being essentially happy and interconnected. So I don't care what he had to say. However, it's like that pushback you mentioned. That was back in I would imagine if James wrote that at his peak, it was probably in the 1860s, something like that, 1870s. And that person wrote that thing then, a typical sort of pamphlet. We'll show this William James lunatic. He's really a pervert. And although this person didn't call him a pervert, what he was essentially saying was that your mind is broken. It's broken because you're not understanding that this is errant nonsense and fairy stories. I didn't want to get into a whole thing about what you and I have talked about a million times, which is direct experience. And that to deny someone else's direct experience is really oppressive, but it's part of the game, the movie that we're in, that other people haven't had those experiences and therefore don't believe that they could possibly exist. And obviously your experience with Maharaji and quite a few others was so powerful that it transmogrifies into when he left the planet. Yeah. So that you said, I quote you, that when you were in that situation, time and space just disappeared. And other people who are not nearly as close to it as you are have had that experience by transmission, either by you or someone of those dozens of people, not necessarily saying anything, even just being who they are. Like our friend Michael, for instance, who is just, he gets darshan from people who've had darshan. And it's not phony. It's very real for him. It's very powerful and then changed his life. And so you can't really debate the mystical experience, in my opinion. I think it's folly in a way, because you're only going to end up, it becomes a test of your own ability to be detached from someone who absolutely doesn't believe in what you live your life for.
Right. And that's going to happen. People that have these experiences get pushback, like, those crazy things I read, that he himself, William James, got pushed back. And every one of us gets pushback from people who are fearful, because these experiences open other dimensions up, which can be very nerve-wracking for people that are really trying to hold on to that ego identity, hold on to their role. You know, it's very challenging for many people, which is why there's nothing, once you, and everyone, it's not just like our friend Michael, who's getting this from people who've been around these great beings. It's everyone. That's why I love all of these different 9 different types of mystical experience, because everyone has had one, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, if you reach back, I mean, obviously, if you've been terribly oppressed, you know, from babyhood onward, maybe it's a difficult karmic predicament. But other than that, you can talk to people and they go, gee, did you ever, when you were a kid, you just sort of went into a kind of spacey thing, and you weren't really in your house, and you were feeling very wide open, joyful, it happened for like a minute. You were just sitting there. That's what that is. And everyone's had that kind of thing. When I first started really meditating, when I went to India and we were in the Himalayas with Ramdas, me, Krishnadas, Ramesh, and others, and we meditated in this great siddha's a cowshed that he had used, 100 years before, or no, maybe 70 years before. And that was Harikan Baba. And my first sit in there, I had this very absorbed meditative experience. And in it, I realized, holy shit. Because what happened to me, part of the experience was I felt like I weighed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. I couldn't move. I felt like big boulders were in my lap. I was so heavy. And I realized, shit, when I was about 8 years old or something, I had that experience. I realized it in that moment. I had never thought of it from that time forward. And in that moment, I realized I had that experience. So I know very well that many of us have had some experience along the line of a mystical experience. And the fact is, we go back to what you were talking about, the Bardos in the beginning, and the preparation for being able to be non-attached, and so that we can be open to the transitions that come, and many different aspects. Some of them are fearful, and to be able to be open is to be able to be detached from the identity with that self, right? And then we talked about emptiness. Well, none of this can happen until you trust that mystical experience that leads you to connect with the inner true self, true nature, whatever we want to call it. So I think honoring the mystical experience that all of us have had, and it's good to even think about that. When did you have one? Maybe write it down now if you never wrote it down, something like that. That makes sense?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's a form of practice to recall.
Yeah.
Recall, and the Christian path talks about it in terms of articles of faith. And that might have been corrupted, and the word Christian is even corrupted so much these days. But let's talk about mystical Christianity. John of the Cross and those people believed that you would have an experience, and it would be sacred, and then that experience would resound through your whole life, and you would reach back for it. Just reach back and say, "Oh, I had that experience at that time." And those articles of faith. It's an antique expression, but I think they mean that.
Yeah.
You have something that's so blinding. The problem with drugs is that they don't, you don't necessarily remember what experience you had. Whereas when you get them without that, no, my experience with nitrous was totally benign. In the early 1970s, I had a very marvelous dentist on 14th Street in New York, and he would always put me as the last person on a Friday night. And he had gigantic, illimitable tanks of nitrous. He and I would just sit there for hours and we'd do a big, huge dose of oxygen and then walk out onto 14th Street. We're fine. What I do remember about it is it was benign. It wasn't like some of the psychedelic experiences I had where there was a great deal of darkness in there and I was frightened to what I was perceiving or thought I was. With the nitrous, it was just almost like being in some kind of pure land.
Yeah.
Where what resonated was just the pure joy of being alive. When our friend Peter Goldsmith and I went to see Bob Dylan about 20 years ago in Philadelphia, and he was playing at that place called The Barn, I think it's called. It was him and Patti Smith, and we were kind of late. But when we got there, in the street that goes to the barn, it's a wide street. We were shocked to find that on both sides there were about 10 nitrous oxide tanks on kind of crates, and you would give the guy $5.
Whoa.
And you do a big bunch of nitrous and then go and see Patty and Bob. I didn't do it because I didn't need nitrous to see Bob Dylan, and I thought maybe
so great.
He was an ogre or something. So, but that was the only time I ever saw it. It was completely illegal, and there was nobody was stopping it. I was saying, if you really want to have a good time, do this.
Yeah,
so that's a little memory. But nitrous is very interesting because I don't think it has any harmful effects. It doesn't. They used to say it would kill brain cells. Well, maybe I'm the proof of that. Because I was just about to say I haven't lost any, but I'll take that back.
Yeah. Oh, listen, let me do say, because you introduced one thing and we're at the end of the podcast, but the Christian mystics, and when we talk about mysticism, I'm glad you brought that up because some great literature is there that really can be helpful. Of course, St. John and Teresa Avila. But we have someone in our satsang, Mirabai Star. So everybody, Mirabai writes beautifully about the Christian mystics and translates Avila and so on. And you guys doing the show notes, okay, let's get everybody acquainted with Mirabai's books as well as the William James Varieties of Mystical Experience and so on.
Yeah, would you have the those nine printed with the podcast?
I'm gonna, you guys print, we're definitely gonna put those in the show notes or put a link, and David's book on the bar. What's the book on? You showed the book, so they'll be able to get it.
It's kind of hard to get, but one good thing, it's called the Bardo Guidebook by Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche, and it's really not available anymore in this form, unfortunately. But it's on Kindle.
Okay, Kindle for those.
Kindle, $9 in Kindle. This one cost $55 or $500, as I said.
Really? Holy shit.
It's just not, doesn't seem to be available. But that doesn't matter. You don't need a book, you just need the words.
Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, Blazing Splendor.
Yeah.
Got
the
it.
Best title ever.
Yeah, the best title ever.
Blazing Saddle.
Yeah. Put that in there too. It's my favorite movie. Bad Bob is in Blazing Saddles. I quote him all the time. Oh, thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you. Had a great time.
Yeah, we do. It's one thing I look forward to. It's really great.
You too.
Everybody, this is Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network with David Silver and I, and we'll see you next week. Ram Ram.